aboard!
Hey, what's up, everybody? You're listening to Cannabis Karaoke, where we ask you to grab the mic and tell your story. Get inside info from today's most interesting cannabis pioneers, and from the first note to the end of the song, listen up as you get to hear the stories of success on Cannabis Karaoke. All right, here we are again, Cannabis Karaoke. And, I'm super excited to talk to our next guest. We like to refer to her, I think we just came up with the term, it was pioneer, advocate, guru, and casualty of the cannabis space, Genifer Murray. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful to be here.
Well, I did a little research on you, and I'm excited to talk to you. You have been in and around the cannabis scene for better part of a decade, I think over a decade at this point, and probably longer as a user. But the premise of the show, like we talked a little bit before we got on, is, what drives you in cannabis? Why cannabis? And then how does that play into your life? And at any point, just go in whatever direction you want. It's kind of a ad-lib show.
Great. So would you like me to just give a little bit of background?
Why don't you start with some background? But then, really what I want to understand is, like, how does cannabis intertwine itself in your life and why?
Yeah. So, God, the first time I smoked cannabis, I remember it. I was 14 and I was at Parker Days in Parker, Colorado, and a gentleman I should say a kid, had a bubble. You blow the bubbles.
Oh yeah.
So he made a little bong out of that thing. Probably had soap in it too.
Oh, neat.
Anyway, so I remember that. I remember giggling. After that, I smoked off and on, for most of my life until the cannabis industry. And since I quit drinking alcohol, and I smoke at night, sometimes during the day on the weekend. But it is far better for me than alcohol because I am a type A. I'm already aggressive, and cannabis, just kind of chills me out and helps me take a step back instead of being reactive versus alcohol. So it's been an amazing plant, although I didn't really understand all of what it's about and its benefits, of course, until I got into this industry in 2010. So yeah, I am definitely a big fan. In 2010, I was visiting in Arizona, a friend of a friend's restaurant, and I ran into a gentleman who started asking me questions, found out I had a science degree, and asked me what I thought about testing marijuana. And I put my fingers up to my lips like I'm holding a joint, and I said, testing marijuana? And he said, no, silly. Like, they test for active ingredients in pharmaceuticals. So light bulb went on, and that was it. We partnered. He happened to live in Colorado Springs, and we partnered. He had a completely different skill set than I did, and it was agreed that I would be the face because I, had, I guess, less of a risk, even though it still was a heavy risk back then. He had kids and he had a wife, and so that was fine. So I bought him out in 2011, brought on another partner, and started, we started one of the first cannabis testing labs in the country, first woman-owned testing lab, which I'm very proud of. If you will, but no one really knew what it was, and there were no regulations. So myself and my entire staff had to get red cards or medical cards to make sure we weren't breaking the law. But I called DORA, the Department of Regulatory Agencies. Oh my God, I'll never forget. She scared me to death. She said it's absolutely illegal. I wouldn't advise it. So, it was scary, and you had to take risks, big risks back then, as all of the pioneers who started around regulation understand that it was risky. I didn't have. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask. So people know you had your lab in Colorado, which was the first state to recognize recreational cannabis, and probably one of the first places. I mean, I think, look, California's had testing for some time now, but there was no forced testing. There was no, like, we had kind of made
No.
up our own ISO standards, I guess. And so Colorado was like the real first, like, hey, this is happening. Tell us a little bit about, because you talked about risk, which is funny because everybody shares risk, but talk to us a little bit about how you mitigated that risk, and like the first woman founded and ran cannabis lab. What other challenges did you face? Not just regulatory, because those are expected, like people that were bringing product to test with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was very interesting. And, yes, Colorado, then Washington, but actually Colorado was very slow to test. It has been medical since 2000. And of course, everything didn't start popping up until 2009 when Obama sent out the Ogden memo. And then all of a sudden it was like dispensaries were everywhere. But they didn't implement mandatory testing forever. And in fact, when it went rec in 2012, I mean, we were ready to close. The end of summer 2012, we just weren't making it, and people weren't interested. The typical comeback, if I said, about testing, they would say, my shit's the fire. Why would I need to test?
So
or
how
I
do
don't
you
need
not
to
test though in a regulated environment? So Colorado wasn't enforcing?
They were slow to go. No, first they said, oh, there's not enough testing labs, which, my lab was large. It was over 4,000 square feet, and I had over at least $1 million in equipment, and I could test everything, not at first, but by the end I could test everything, including heavy metals. But, they messed around and said, oh, there's not enough testing labs. And then, of course, you had the industry lobbying against it.
Yeah.
Now, I know a lot of people in Colorado are going to say, no, we weren't. And yes, they were. And I get it. Some of them were worried that the labs weren't, being audited.
Yeah, and calibrated. I mean, there's always, California's gone through its multiple phases, and it's new for the labs. They're not, they're calibrating, their devices and just getting used to. It's like they've been using them for a decade already. So there's all kinds of, crazy worries.
The difference now and then is you had nobody to call. I mean, I remember calling Shimadzu, who's a really big manufacturer of instrumentation now. I called them and the guy didn't even know what to do with me. So there was nobody to call. Now, Steep Hill was there when I started. And, my chemist tried to call them and basically they said pound sand, which I would have too, right?
Sure.
But now you have no excuse. You have no excuse. You have brilliant minds in this industry. This is not reinventing the wheel. This is a plant like any other. It is just about, creating a method, validating the method and making sure that you have. Sorry, there's so much going on here.
No worries.
To make sure.
Because you're on fire right now.
Fire, I know. My shit's the fire. Oh my God, if I have to hear that one more time. And then, what I would tell people? I would say, hey, before you get rid of a strain, test it. Because guess what? You probably have some minor cannabinoids, including CBD. So one of my favorite stories is, one of the first CBD strains I tested was a guy in Colorado Springs. I had been at him for a month and he didn't see value in it. Well, then he finally gave me some tests, and sure enough, I found a 1-to-1. And this was 2010. And I was like, oh my God, we tested it several times. I called him back and I said, Jeff, this is why you test. And he's like, what? And I go, you have a 1-to-1 with CBD. He goes, what's CBD? So I explained to him what CBD was. He goes, oh my God, what strain? And I told him and he goes, oh, we got rid of it. Well, why? Low yield, doesn't get you high, and an ugly plant. It looks,
no nose.
Yeah, of course, back then. Yeah, back then. Now you can't really tell the difference. But I was like, see, Jeff, that's why I told you to test before you threw it out, And so many people have lost great genetics, including CBC, CBG.
Well,
You
that
know,
was,
because they've
you
been
were so
pressed.
early on that. I mean, it's
I
just
know.
starting to hit market now. I mean, do you think that might be part of the issue with being a visionary sometimes?
Oh, of course. Way too early to market. But you know what though? I would have been on the top, no doubt, if I wouldn't have hooked my wagon to a bad investor. There's no doubt. I mean, we had over 50% of the market. We had, you know, all of the science companies now wanting to put in instrumentation into our lab so they could do white papers and they could understand the industry. So I have no doubt we would be one, if not the top lab currently, especially since my partner, my second partner, oh my God, he was a technology genius. And, you know, we were on the first page of Google. He knew how to do all that stuff. And he created a LIMS system for us early on, which, you know, is all about, it's like seed to sale, but for a lab. So anyway, yeah. So if I wouldn't have hooked, so anyway, long story short, yes. So in
So you got to, what you're
2000,
trying to give advice around is like, what is a good pivot? You were early. You had a business. You had
yes.
the vision. You saw not just people think of testing and it's just impurity testing. They don't realize that there's other sets of
Oh
testings that can
yeah.
take place. Terps. I mean, that's how we're finding out so much about the plant.
Yep.
Investment. So whenever you tell people you're an entrepreneur, they automatically think, you know, you've just made it. And I always tell people
Printing money.
the true,
Woo!
the true badge of an entrepreneur is how many times have you failed,
Yep.
and why. And so I always tell people it's 99% luck and 1% hard work. It really is 99% hard work and 1% luck, because you either going to completely make it or you're not. There is no choice. What kind of advice, hindsight's 2020, how do you even navigate new investors nowadays? How do you
Well,
learn?
that's the thing. Well, the good news is there are investors now. I mean, we were looking
Yeah.
for money in 2013. There was no money. Nobody would put money in. So the good news is there's money, but the key is if somebody is rushing you, and then it's bad. It's a bad deal, bad money. And you know, if you are desperate, any of those things, these let's say snakes in the grass, like my investor, they feed on that. They've done this so many times that they know, and they love brand new entrepreneurs. They love. And because why? I was like, oh my God, they picked us. We're amazing. We're, you know, oh my God, you know, and then you find out, oh my God, they're pumping and dumping the stock.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
and just for those that are listening out there, maybe not in the cannabis space, you know, I must get 24 emails a day. I'm sure you do too, from people wanting to
mhm.
lend money,
Yep.
invest in your company, whatever. It's a very crazy, you know, atmosphere when it comes down to like who you choose and why you choose them. So, you know, when you had that happen to you, and I read, you know, I've read a couple things online about it, but you know, one of the things I think I really came to admire about you, not knowing you, was when I read the part about failing and I read the part about knowing when to walk away, because I think pride has a big thing to do with that. And
You bet it does.
share
You
that,
bet. Ego and pride.
how you
Yes.
got there with that one.
Well, so I found out in April of 2015 kind of what was going on. I had no idea what was going on. And my whole world fell apart. I mean, you know, everybody tells you need to separate yourself from your company. Well, my company was everything. My kid, my spouse, my sister, it was all I did. And that's some of the things I learned. I can't get those years back. So you really have to have a work-life balance. But let's go back real quick. Let's go back to the investors and how you find good investors.
Sure.
You have to have referrals, like serious background checks, and you need to pay for those background checks. And then you need referrals. You need to talk to people, Google those people, and find out about these investors. And if I were you, I would even ask for a sideways investor. Everybody has gone sideways with somebody, right? Everybody has. So I always ask, hey, give me 3 referrals, but give me one bad experience you had. You know, and you have to go deep. But on the flip side, a lot of these investors are going to lose money. They have no idea what to look for. And they, again, ego and stuff, they're too prideful to ask for help. I mean, there is a reason people hire consultants, but finding a good consultant is a whole different game. But you really need a consultant to navigate this industry. I truly believe that, especially if you need investment or are investing in it. But anyway, pride and ego. So I find out what's going on. My world turns upside down. And honestly, I was in denial because I was like, oh my God, this is all I've done. This is all I've done for 5 years. What else am I going to do? Oh my God. So I kept at it. And actually, I should have probably walked away shortly after April. But I didn't because it was my baby and because of my employees. I saw us as a big family. I always had a open door policy of any of my employees because, you know, the people that are talking to the customers and helping the customers are your whole company. So you need to be in touch with them. And so I should have walked away sooner, but I was forced. I was locked out of the lab by one of the guys that was a CEO, and I got him out of the CEO position, and then he put himself back in. It's so convoluted, you wouldn't even believe it.
Oh,
I think it needs to be a Lifetime movie. Yeah, it needs to be a Lifetime movie, really. But long story short, they locked me out of my lab, and then it folded 2 months later. So, but the stock is still trading. It is still trading to this day. I've told the SEC. I've told FINRA.
They have no operating
lab. We've had a whistleblower. No, we don't. There's no building. The building was torn down to put up a storage unit.
Crazy.
But no one reads anything. Nobody reads anything. And for you guys that are investing in stock market, you better frickin' read more and find people that are analyzing all of that stuff, because people look at marijuana or cannabis and they're like, woo! And then they invest a bunch of money because, again, we're all printing money.
Sure. And that old adage of a fool and his money are soon parted. So
yeah,
what I'm curious to hear too a little bit, like how once you decided to walk away and it was everything that you had done and like you had stated it, you felt like it was your baby. How does one pick themselves up and continue forward in the cannabis space like you have? And might I add, more potential failure facing you.
Yep. Well, so I picked up right after because I had some clients that we were consulting for with Can Labs, and they came to me and said, oh my God, Genifer, we still need your help. Will you help us? So so I rallied one of my chemists and one of my microbiologists and helped put an in-house lab into another, actually a large group now. But consulting was difficult and it wasn't my favorite. I put myself in the position again where I'm not the skill set. I have a degree in microbiology, but I am not the scientist, even though my dad likes to say that. I was the business person. I was the one that ran that. But, so in consulting, I had to rely on both a chemist and a microbiologist. Were they doing good work, et cetera? So I didn't like that part of it. But also it just wasn't, it just wasn't great, but I had to carry on because I wanted to help those clients. And so I did that for about a year, and I still do some overall consulting, for the industry, because I really want to see people enter and I really want to see people be successful. And again, it's very hard industry to navigate. So I don't charge very much per hour to help people do that. But so learned my lesson there. And then in the meantime, of course, I was speaking across the country and I was lobbying, and I was at the Capitol, and I was on the governor's task force here in Colorado to help implement legalization in the beginning of 2013. So I wanted something representative of marijuana. I wanted people to know why I was at the Capitol, why I was in DC. And so I looked online, and there was only pot culture stuff, which is great. I mean, it's a subculture, but it's just not me. And it's also not going to change the stigma when you're talking to a legislator. So I called my dad, who's a jeweler gemologist, and said, "Hey, Dad, can you make me a piece of jewelry, like a leaf or something, for my lapel? Because I always wear suits." And he said, "Of course, honey." And he flies in, takes me to my favorite steakhouse, and he presented me with a 2.5 carat diamond pave indica leaf.
Wow.
And I've never been married. I don't wear diamonds. My chin hit the floor, and I was like, "What am I going to do with that?" And he goes, "Honey, you're going to wear it proudly." And I did. And I changed minds across the country, because at this time, whether you were for or against it, you wanted to talk about it. It was exciting. You wanted to know the truth. So people would always come talk to me. And I remember sitting next to a couple on the airplane from Oregon. And by the end of talking to them, because they voted against legalization, this was before it went legal. And after the conversation, they said, "God, Genifer, if we would have talked to you before, we would have voted for it." So it's about starting the conversation. And so we turned it into a hobby, and then the hobby led to a business. So Genifer M, my dad wanted to keep my name. And it's a jewelry line to help start the conversation, to help end the stigma, and to end prohibition. So all patients have access to the medicine. That's what the jewelry is about.
That's amazing. And that's just that was an accident.
It was totally, it was totally by accident. And
but the entrepreneur in you saw the opportunity, right? And
and my dad's an entrepreneur too. My dad's a heavy entrepreneur, and so is my stepmom. So
just accidental. So let's talk about a little, like, you have always, California, we have these social equity programs.
Okay.
How are, you have been a huge proponent in the space on behalf of women. What advice can you give women? What advice can you give men in the space? And, where do you see it going? Is it getting better? Tell us your thoughts.
So first of all, we need to work together, right? There needs to be men and women. And, men get all bent out of shape, like, well, why do you have to be excited if it's a woman-owned company? Why, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, why? Because we have to fight for everything we have. I mean, for God's sakes, we couldn't even vote. If we wouldn't have fought for voting, we would have still been not voting at this time. So, I feel like women are waiting for men to go, okay, you're going to have equal salaries, you're going to do this and that. And some companies have, but it is up to women to stick together and make it happen. And how we do that is we spend dollars with companies that are either women-owned or women executives or women on the board. We have to be paying attention to that. Now, I'm not just saying pick a company because it has a woman. Of course, you want to pick a great company, but we need to focus more on that. Also, hiring women. And, I talk to a lot of people, men and women, and I'm like, well, why do you have more women? Well, they don't apply. Well, have you heard of the word recruit? Yes, you need to go out recruit not only women, but minorities. I mean, people have to make a bigger effort. Now, the number in 2015 was 37% of women executive and leaders. It has dropped 10% in 17, and it holds to this day. So it's around 27%. However, now I'm not happy with that number. Of course, I want it to be over 50%. However, if you compare it to women in executive positions in all industries in this country, so nationwide, all industries, the number is 26%, which is absolutely unacceptable and pitiful. So I tell all women, come to cannabis. Whatever you do, you can bring it to cannabis. If you want to change your career, you can do that in cannabis. It is still anyone's game. It's still in its infancy. And I really believe that, women make better business owners in a lot of cases. And, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank spoke at MJ Biz, not this year, but last year. And he had all of his portfolios audited. And guess what? His best performing companies were women owned. And one of the things he said is women set their goals 30% less than men, but make them 95% of the time. Whereas men set their goals higher, but they only make them 25% of the time, which means low morale, low sales, low revenue. So, plus, technically, and I'm stereotyping, but men usually have a bigger ego than women do. And that has a lot to do with being successful.
Egos are definitely being checked, I think, considerably. Very
Agreed.
rarely do you have a white hot industry such as cannabis try to still adhere to its roots. It reminds me, I've mentioned this before, a lot of surfing and cannabis are similar in the sense that there's a storied past. There's the OGs, if you will.
Yes.
And I think that there have been a fair amount of women OGs, and I feel like the industry, as sitting here as a white male, it's hard for me to understand why we can't, like, we do our best to recruit and to try to find people, and we aren't growing very fast, and so we can hire onesies and twosies, but there's not like a Indeed for women and or minorities either. So
right.
Who do you recommend? Do you have anybody that you work with particularly or is there a process that you have gone through that you can share to some of these people that are listening?
As you said, there's really not somewhere, but you know what? There's this amazing thing called LinkedIn, and it actually has a picture, so you would know if it's a male or female. I have almost 16,000 people on my LinkedIn. It has been a great tool for me, and I love reaching out to women. And that's a very amazing tool. And then you have some other things starting, like women funds. So I'm sure you're ArcView.
Yes.
Right. So I always was giving them a lot of crap. I'm like, it's all white men every time I come. And, there are some women, but what are we doing here? Why don't we set aside something for women? And so finally, the end of last year, a few amazing women started a women-owned fund, and they are actively looking for women-owned companies. And I think that's going to happen. That's going to start happening more and more. But I also think the reason that, the number of women dropped is because guess what? It's more accepted now.
Sure.
So guess what? There's more financial industries looking, and guess who the financial industries are? White men. There's less stigma. So at the beginning, it was more focused on medical, which meant more mothers were getting involved. Women rule the healthcare space or the wellness space, which is $4.2 trillion. Well, guess what? A huge sector of cannabis is wellness. So it just makes sense that women would be a huge part of that.
No, 100% agree. And the one thing I do enjoy about this industry is that we do have voices such as yours that are constantly a proponent of a balance. I think that's really what we all strive to have in the cannabis space, is a little bit of balance. So we've got to, which is kind of an ironic statement, but listen, you've been an amazing entrepreneur. Why don't you tell us a little bit about behind the scenes, Jen, not Genifer, and how she medicates, like what and when you medicate, and how you discovered that. Like, what did it take? I mean, I know you talked about the bubble bottle and back when you were younger, but we all kind of have that moment where we started realizing how cannabis was impacting our life.
So, oh my God, so many things, but let me start out with my father. It has been an incredible bonding experience, if you will. My father had not smoked. He was a hippie and back in the day and liked his weed. And there's some really funny stories with that. But, he hadn't smoked it in 20, 30 years. And he has a friend named Barry, and Barry came over, and my dad goes, Genifer, I smoked with Barry. And I said, oh my God. And this was like 2 years, 3 years me into it. And he said, Genifer, he has terrible problems with his feet because he was a jeweler gemologist and went to jewelry shows that were like 14 days standing on your feet. So he goes, Genifer, my feet didn't hurt and I slept all night. And I go, Dad, medical marijuana. And he goes, oh, because, the mind is not on medical marijuana, even though, it makes you feel good. But in the 70s, it was just like, not looked at as necessarily. I mean, people knew it was medicinal, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't. My dad didn't look for pot as a medicine, if you will, even though it was great for him, but so it has been an incredible bonding for us. Now it has also been an incredible bonding for my stepmom. They are both in the industry. My stepmom got in totally on her own in Arizona, and now she's doing amazing stuff. So just the industry, but Dad and I, yes, we like to smoke together, and we really bond. Now,
do you smoke a joint? Do you smoke a bowl? Do you smoke?
We smoke a bowl. We smoke a joint. Sometimes he likes to do dabs.
Oh, wow.
I do dabs rarely because it really boosts your tolerance up. I mean, but I'm a flower girl through and through. If I could have my preference, it would be a bong. Like but I want to trade my bong in for a volcano. So I'm hoping
what do you think about
can help me out.
Those Puffcos? Have you seen those?
I have not seen
They're like a little mini.
Puffco.
They're like a dab rig, I think, but they're like a volcano at the same time, and they're portable and easy to use. But I agree. For me, I'm a vape mainly, and then I flower at the end of the day. But dabbing is next level. If I have a project, I'll dab because then it's kind of works like coffee for me, where I'm like jazzed up for whatever reason.
See, oh my God, not me.
As a flower, so question: sun grown, indoor?
It just kind of depends. I will tell you right now, I am not a connoisseur. Like if you give me some pot, I will not know if it's a chem dog or OG or any of that. I have no idea. I was a science person. I know the cannabinoids and I know all of that kind of stuff, but there's certain strains that I like, but again, how do we even know those are the strains?
Sure.
We don't, unless you have a DNA test. So I can tell you some of the strains I like, but yeah, a volcano for home, because I really do, of course, smoking bongs is not optimal for my lungs. I'm sure. I mean, even though it doesn't bother me and I hike a lot, but I just think I do not like personal vapes. I hate them. Everybody that sells one says, oh my God, smoke this. It's great. And it does nothing for me, honestly. Some have got me high for a few minutes and that's it. So I definitely prefer to smoke flower, if I had my druthers. And then dabs, they're a different thing, but I don't think that they're more like, I don't know. It's hard to explain for me, but it is definitely a different high. And then of course, edibles, sometimes, but, and excuse me if you know this already, but a lot of people don't know this, but when you smoke cannabis, it produces Delta 9. And when you eat cannabis, it's 11 hydroxy. It's a completely different drug, a completely different molecule. And actually, in the beginning of regulation, a lot of people wanted the drug separated out here because people don't realize that. And that's why your effects from eating it are completely different than smoking it. And then you have people that can eat and eat and eat and never feel anything. It's crazy.
Well, do you think we're going to be learning more in the future? Like eventually there'll be a DNA makeup that you'll be able to say, Durban poison works best for you. And then that's what you stick to?
Oh,
Because
down the road?
that's what
Yes.
triggers your terp reactions, your, endocannabinoid system. The whole component just gets kicked off with Durban. Like people have given me fire and it ends up not doing anything to me. And then I'll smoke something that has almost no nose and it's like, whoa. So it's really independently driven. I think back in the day, we just stayed away from the ones that made us contemplate life too much and then went more with the ones that made us feel good was kind of how we did it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've been breeding for decades for high THC. And just because you have high THC doesn't mean you're going to get higher.
When's that
people
going to
don't
change?
understand that. It's the whole makeup of all the terpenes working with the cannabinoids in your body. What did you eat? What's your mind state? I mean, you and I could smoke the exact same joint and have two completely different experiences. It's just the way it is. And so it's going to be very hard. We do need to look at it on a micro level, like you said, whereas right now, they're looking at drugs for certain proteins on certain cancers, and they're looking at your DNA. That you're absolutely right. They will be looking at that. Now, something absolutely fascinating about 3 years ago at the Cannabis Science Conference that Josh Krosny does in Portland. He actually had a second one in Maryland this year. But Dr. Deddy, I think his name's Deddy, maybe that's his first name, but he's Israeli and he's a leading scientist. And he did a presentation on extraction methods and disease. So he took 3 diseases. I can't remember what they were, ailments. Okay. One was colon, one was something else. And then he had same exact strains, same exact plants, all homogenized, and then did ethanol extraction, did butane extraction, and did CO2 extraction. And oh my God, the CO2 extracted plant did better for one of the diseases. The ethanol extraction did better for another disease, and the butane extraction did nothing.
That's when are we going to see that on a consumer level? When are we going to see, where do you see things? I mean, I always laugh. It's like when people come into a club and they go, I just want to buy whatever tests the highest THC. And I'm like,
or the cheapest.
I'm like, well, do you walk in buying moonshine when you go to a liquor store? I mean, there is some
Bacardi 151. Come on.
Let's just blow our eyebrows off while we're at it. So I was like, I really, how do we get the industry? I mean, now things are going to experience, right? You have these brands that are coming out with experience blends where they're taking multiple strains and blending them to get the calm effect, the whatever effect, right? And so what do you see being effective for the consumer, being someone that's been on the back end of testing and finding one-to-one CBDs, which I think that's the most exciting thing that we've got going. It's nice to have a bunch of really nice quality cannabis out there, but the whole CBD, THC-driven CBD is really the magic that we're starting to uncover. But when do we change it's a Jack Herrera or it's a whatever strain and it's whatever category, indica dominant and tests out at, 29 THC. When do we get past that? When do we get to the next step?
Well, listen, I tried to educate people years ago on the cannabinoid profile, not indica, sativa. That really doesn't tell you anything. I mean, and this education starts at the bud tender. And I hate that word, but that starts at the bud tender. And I'm telling you, 9 out of 10 bud tenders have no idea what they're talking about. They sell what they're told to sell or what they have a lot of. And I went into a dispensary the other day and I said, so what do you recommend? Well, so-and-so has the highest THC. And I said, I don't want the highest THC. I asked what you liked. And they're like, And unfortunately, I tried very hard to educate people that it's the cannabinoid profile. Now, what you brought up with THC cannabis derived is interesting because, if I had cancer, do you know what kind of cannabis I would have? I would have whole plant, meaning chlorophyll, meaning every single part of that plant would go in my body. It would be in a tincture. I don't care if it tasted like crap. That's what I would have if I had cancer. Now, there are hopefully studies going on right now to see, because of course a lot of the thought is that you need a little bit of THC to really make, CBD effective, and the entourage effect. But now you're looking at CBD isolate. Does isolate even work? I don't know. Is it a suggestion, a mind body, where it's like, oh, take this tincture and it's going to make you happy, and then, oh, you're happy, or whatever, it tells you. A lot of that is just you telling yourself. What is that called? I'm having a placebo effect. Yeah.
I mean, there's
I
a
think
lot of that
of this
happening, I feel.
Oh, it's a ton.
You
But
know,
we need to know what's bioavailable. Does it even get in your body? One, and two, what's your bioactivity? Is it working? How much gets flushed out? Like
how does one
cannabis,
find that out, though? I mean, how do you
your
know?
receptors are only so big.
True.
So once your receptors are full, the rest of it flushes out like a vitamin, as far as
Sure.
I know right now. Of course, that could change tomorrow. But so how do we? What did you say? How do we? Why don't we know that? Or when
How do we
know?
know?
That? I have
How do
no
we know
idea.
what's bioactive in our body? Like, how do we?
Clinical trials,
Right.
blood drawn. I mean, all of these things that I wish some of these bigger companies were spending money on, and they are. Like,
There are some brands that do.
Yeah, I think Canopy. I think a lot of Canadian companies are really spending the money to do so. Now, how come I want studies on vape pens? I can tell you right now, I saw my first electronic cigarette in 2006. That's not very long that it has been out. I know for a fact when I had my first vaporizer, it was burning the wick, it was burning the plastic, it had peg in it, it had, a whole bunch of stuff. Like right now, how do you know it's not doing that? They're all from China.
Right.
They're all from China. So and I keep encouraging companies to have them made here. Yes, it's expensive, but you have a lot more quality control. You can have a scientist look at it, but where are the vaporizer studies?
Right.
I don't know.
I think there's a lot of, I think they're so concerned, when it comes to regulatory, and you've worked on regulatory stuff, so you're the expert here, but my 2 cents is they're more focused on taxes and testing, whatever that may be, kind of in a not just test it. Just test it for this and just test it for that. But then there's no downline. And I think you're right. I think we are going to start, everybody vapes. I mean, it's, if you're not vaping,
oh yeah.
If you're not vaping cannabis, you're vaping CBD or you're vaping tobacco. And like literally everybody, you don't go down the street without counting heads on those. It's very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting perspective of, really what you're offering here, because as people from outside the industry ask people like us, like, what do you recommend? It would be really nice to be able to guide them appropriately, but would you say we're still just so early that we don't know?
Well, I feel that way. I have a Hanu stone. Have you seen those?
Yes, I have. Sabo.
Okay,
shout out to Sabo.
Sabo, love Sabo.
Yes.
I absolutely love it. I mean, as far as the device goes, I love it.
And that's
but
a
again,
C-cell.
I bought
That's
a cartridge.
C-cell
I bought a cart.
Right?
Yeah, it's a pod thing, kind of like PAX.
Yep.
But I, bought a pod and blah. The device is great. You don't even know how many vape pens I have. And I end up giving them away because most people do like them. And yes, they're very convenient. But again, I do not like them, and I do not get high from them. And, it's like when I tell people I don't like to go to Vail because I'm on a snowboard and I don't like to do the catwalk. And every single person's like, oh, I know Vail so much. You won't have to go on the catwalk. And every time I have to go on a catwalk, it's just like that with vape. Oh, I know. We sell one that you'll love. We sell this, all of this. And it's just not my thing. But studies, we need more studies. And again, butane, I'm not saying butane is bad or good. I know it's bad if it's left in. And you can imagine when I was first testing what kind of test results we had. It was downright scary. But do we know it's bad? I don't know. I mean, it's been used for other things, but I don't know. Does it change the molecular structure inside? I don't know. And nobody really knows. And, some scientists say, I wouldn't do it. Others are like, it's fine. So again, until we have, I'm a big proponent of science, until we have those answers, we are in scary ground. What I do know is we've been smoking cannabis since 2900 BC. So I'm pretty happy with that. And now that we test for, pesticides, but I mean, listen, what did we smoke in the 80s? We smoked Mexican ditchweed.
Yeah.
How much pesticides were on that?
Probably quite a bit.
I mean, come on. They were loaded with pesticides.
Yeah.
So, cannabis.
So are you saying it's okay to smoke pesticides? Is that
No, I am not. And maybe that's why I'm crazy now. I will put it to
definitely.
Those pesticides,
well, I wouldn't say you're crazy. I think people, first of all, when you get a chance, I'd like you to check out our website. It's Geniferm.com. That's her jewelry website. You can learn a little bit about her story there. But, you are furthest thing from crazy. I think what definitely what you are is a disruptor in the space. And you're willing to have a position, which is, it's very refreshing because it's hard to, like, I vape, but I'm listening to you and I'm going, man, you're right. Like, I'm kind of second guessing everything, but my vape does kind of work for me. But we used to, when we first started seeing vape, like, I was a big fan of the RSO, like, just give me that and give me full body. And, it's not pretty. It looks like black tar heroin because it's so dark, but it has so much of a better effect on your body. It's like the same. I feel like what I want us to avoid is doing the same thing we did to like sugarcane to get sugar. Let's not do to cannabis, because we've learned that the reason that sugar is in fiber is because you don't want to consume a lot of it or it makes you crazy. Maybe cannabis in its most, concentrated form, like sometimes dabs, is not always best for everybody. And so I think we have to find a balance of how can we use the plant at its maximum capacity, not what man thinks its maximum capacity is. Would you say that is a good statement?
Absolutely. I think that the raw plant itself has the most amazing properties, but we're, messing around with it for either, for money, money, you cut corners and stuff, or, well, usually it comes down to money, or, you don't have a lot of materials, so you're trying to make the most of it. That's why I said I can't stand online when people are like, where can I get the cheapest hash oil? It's like, really? Well, you get what you pay for. If you're going to get cheap hash oil, guess what?
Well, we're breeding ourselves with Amazon on that,
cheap.
But that's a whole nother discussion. I believe that I'm willing to pay, like, for a good product for a good price. Like, I'll overpay sometimes if it's phenomenal. I try not to buy on price, because you're absolutely right. If you go in asking for the cheapest, you're going to get the cheapest experience possible. Why don't you do me a favor? Tell people, I want you to give yourself a little plug. You've been an amazing guest, and I want people to be able to go to your website and find it. And I also want them to find you on social media, and I also want them to visit you if you're going to be at any shows. So can you give us all that information?
Yeah. So just so you know, and I thought we would get into this, but I currently represent a company called Drug Plastics.
Go for it. We have more time. Go ahead.
Okay, great. They recruited me about a year ago to help them get into the cannabis space in a business development capacity. Drug Plastics is a privately held second-generation pharmaceutical nutraceutical packaging company that is FDA approved. You probably have a bottle in your house. They do generic, Centrum bottle, Advil, very reputable, and again, FDA approved. So I'm helping them. And a funny story, especially since you said sugarcane, we make a sugarcane bottle out of sugarcane. And the other day, a buddy of mine came over to smoke, and he had bought some some cannabis at Terrapin Station, which is extremely good cannabis here. If you haven't had it, you need to. His name's Chris Woods, by all means, an amazing pioneer. But he whips it out, and I go, oh my God, that's our bottle from Drug Plastics. So Terrapin Station has 4 colors of a bottle. They sell 8s in, and they have a custom closure, custom stamp. But anyway,
and they're using the sugarcane bottles. I mean, that's what we have to get to. There's so much waste in the cannabis space. I mean, it's ridiculous.
So much. Because of regulation, though. I mean,
no, for sure.
Not only do you have to have a container, then you have to have all the pieces wrapped inside the container. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's really sad. And it's giving us a bad name, even though it's every industry.
Well, we just have to be smarter. I think there are businesses that are starting to do sustainable packaging. And I think globally, we need to be paying attention to that. Everybody's guilty of it. And I think especially in cannabis, if the problem is that, again, it comes down to money and it comes down to taxation. And what happens is a quarter makes a difference, unfortunately, in this space.
Oh, yes, it does.
100%. So a quarter makes a difference. And all of a sudden the person's like, well, I'll just do that in plastic and polystyrene or whatever, instead of doing it out of sugarcane. But we have to have some conscious around what we're trying to accomplish here. Yes, we want to all make money. But we got to get away from that cheapest. We got to not even entertain the person that's looking for the cheapest hash oil. That person just needs to be told, sorry, there is no such thing. Here's what we do have. And, we got to stop driving the plant as a commodity price-wise and look at it from its, I don't know, not just medicinal, but it's what it can actually give us,
That's not going to happen, though, unfortunately.
Don't be so negative.
No, but it is. It will be. Listen, it will be a commodity, and that's okay, because that will give room for the boutique brands like Willie's and some other, top of the line brands. Well, and you're now seeing some branded cannabis. And listen, when I go into a dispensary, right, of course they're going to tell you they have top shelf. Of course they're going to tell you that. But do you know, I've smoked top shelf from some of these places, and it sucks.
Well,
when you get Willie's Reserve, that is amazing pot. Period. I've never had any bad Willie's Reserve pot. Now, maybe some of your listeners are going to say no, but I think that it will be a commodity, and that's just it's just what it is. But then you're going to have it's just like beer. Yeah. You're going to have craft cannabis, so it's going to be great. The people that really love to grow cannabis are going to have their opportunity to shine with unique genetics, and stop trying to be like your neighbor and have the exact same strains everybody has.
Well, I think I think what I'd like to see, my ask would be for the consumer, because ultimately the consumer impacts the industry. If the consumer stops accepting toxic packaging, and the consumer stops supporting theories on top shelf, and the consumer gets educated, we've got a long road to go. But I think that's where because you go to any business and say you got to be sustainable, and unless they're forced to do it, they're not going to find a way to it.
Okay. So I see what you're saying. And that's what I said with lab testing. I said the consumer has to drive this. Surely they want to know what's in their cannabis. Well, guess what? Most people thought it was tested.
Well,
they never questioned it.
How long did we eat Roundup? I mean, we've, as a human,
we're still eating Roundup.
Everybody thinks, I've read studies, and I'm probably going to get blasted for this, but that gluten intolerance is sometimes related to glyphosate, because that's the same experience you get you're probably eating glyphosate inebriated bread, which is causing you to have those feelings. So we should ask what's in everything we consume.
Yes, we should. We have the right to know.
We need to stop being worried about certain bugs and be more worried about chemicals. Because that's really the difference.
Because some of those bugs are good.
Yes.
Some of the fungus is good.
Absolutely. All right.
I know, but
go ahead.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say we're going in the same direction, and people just need to be more aware. And you should have some ethos. If you're a brand, shame on you if you're misleading people for money.
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, snake oil THC was huge here, right in the beginning, and now it's snake oil CBD. I can't stand it. It's like nails down a chalkboard. Everybody's talking about it like it's a miracle, and they have no idea what it is, nothing about it. They have no idea that there's over 145 cannabinoids in this plant, that we're just scratching the surface. You don't know. But yes, it does start at the consumer. It's just really hard, because you're always going to have people that shop by price. You're never going to be able to convince them that you get what you pay for. Now, I'm not saying don't shop around. Of course, you get a handyman, you want a couple of quotes. But at the end of the day, if you see something super cheap, there's a reason. Period.
You get what you pay for.
Yeah, you do. But can I shamelessly plug some of my stuff, like you said?
Go. Go, girl. Do it.
So you can visit Drug Plastics at drugplastics.com. We have a great user-friendly website there. And we also do custom molds. So if people are interested in some custom molding, we would love to work with them. Genifer M is GENIFERM.com. We have silver, gold, diamonds. We also do custom jewelry as well. We do wholesale, dispensaries, head shops. We're actually in a jewelry store in upstate New York. They actually they only sell our molecules. Our molecules are our biggest seller. So we have CBD and THC now, all kinds of stones, gold, silver. And this jewelry store said, we want to sell your molecules. And they hung up a sign as big as their sign, and they sell out all the time. It's pretty awesome. So, and then we have Instagram, Genifer M Jewelry. We also have moleculejewelry.com. We're going to build out our molecule line. And then, of course, I'm on LinkedIn, Genifer Murray. I'm on Facebook personally. And reach out and say hi. And again,
what shows are you going to be going to? Are you going to any shows here pretty soon?
I just was at MJ Biz. I think the next show I'm going to is probably MJ Biz International. I'll definitely be at
Toronto,
MJ Biz Vegas.
Right?
That's in Toronto.
Right.
Yeah.
In August or when is that?
It's in September now.
September. Okay. So if you're in Toronto, right, check them out. Go see Genifer.
And then I don't know if you personally have seen this, but I was lucky enough to be on 2 Chainz, most expensivest show.
No, I didn't see that. Why didn't you bring that up earlier?
I don't know.
We'll have
do you know
to do
who
another.
2 Chainz is?
Yes, 2 Chainz the rapper.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
So he has a show on Vice called The Most Expensivest. You can YouTube.
Oh, yes. Chainz. Okay. Yes. I've seen the show.
You can.
I wonder if I probably have watched your episode.
I
do. I'm looking at it on your website right now. I remember
It's hilarious.
That's funny stuff.
But even more funny, or even funnier, is go to YouTube and find it and all the comments on there.
Were they good or bad?
About 50-50.
I love it. You know what we call those? We call them keyboard warriors. That's.
Oh, you bet.
Those people.
It's great. I mean, I don't take anything personally anymore. I mean, I grew out of that, and I think it's hilarious, and they only can look out of their vernacular. So it's good.
Well, I've really appreciated talking to you, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation. And I just. You've been, this hour has been amazing. I've learned so much about you, and I hope everybody else enjoys it as much as I did.
You're so sweet. I really appreciate you having me on and, educating people. It's really great. And thanks again.
That's a wrap. Thank you for listening to this edition of Cannabis Karaoke, another kick-ass podcast about all things cannabis. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and our website, cannabiskaraoke.tv. And if you or someone you know would like to be on the show, please hit the book your interview button on the right. Cannabis Karaoke. Grab the mic and tell your story. Wow.